And specifically with AI, we get into lots and lots of interesting questions. And Elena, we've been working through this together over the course of the last 9-12 months, and we've successfully managed to get the first AI implementations in place, but it wasn't easy. And Elena's going to take you through why it isn't just as easy.
But maybe also why it's easy.
Well, why it could be easy. So take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I am CLO at Unblu, but I'm actually an IT lawyer, fundamentally. So I came here at Unblu, and the main challenge and learning for me has been always about the product, the technology, and how we apply it to the banking sector. It's the first time a legal presentation, at least the ones I made, has been introduced as exciting, so I hope it is. But it's true that the AI Act and its implementation and its application, it is an exciting field. And what it makes exciting, at least for lawyers, is certainly that it went pretty fast. This is an EU regulation. EU regulations always, or typically take quite some time for the European Parliament to get them through. This one started in 2021 and got approved and enforced actually in 2024, which is a relatively quick time for our institutions. That also comes with quite a lot of questions still open and a lot of work to do and a lot of, there's no case law yet, of course, so we still don't know how a lot of the concepts that have been developed under the AI Act will be interpreted by the European courts, etc., and the authorities. But there are a few things that I will mention that we actually know and that will make it actually quite interesting, specifically for the financial segment. Another interesting thing about the AI Act is actually the AI itself. It's a technology that is in the going. It's something that is evolving really fast. And the AI Act, like all regulation and all laws, is always too late on what the technology does. So you probably have heard a few weeks ago that Draghi said that the AI Act may be stifling innovation simply because the AI, as it is already overstepping or overachieving on computational flops. So the operation and the computational capacity of the AI is well above the 10 to the 25th that the AI Act requires. Does it really matter? This is always our questions, right? It's always like that. All the laws arrive too late on the technologies. But there is something really cool about the AI Act. The AI Act follows a path that the EU Commission and now the EU Parliament have already started before with the GDPR. It's risk-based, and it's also, it has a risk-based approach, but it's also looking forward, it's programmatic, so it requires different interpretation. There are a series of actors in the game. And it focuses on innovation. Curiously enough, and contrary to what has been said, despite its limitation, which will be overcome anyways, the AI Act aims to give boundaries to actually create more innovation, not to stifle innovation. And I keep thinking, I've been around for quite some time, and I keep thinking about when the cloud technology came up. Our branches and our segments and our sectors have been really reluctant in adopting cloud for many, many years. I would say probably for 10 years or so. There was a reason for this, which was also beyond the fact that the cloud was a new technology and the fact that people were worrying that they might not trust where their data was going. It was also because there was no particular regulations around the cloud. Nobody really knew how to put the boundaries around it, what to do, what not to do. The AI Act comes and actually tells us, yes, we can do it, yes, you must do it. It encourages innovation. It encourages specifically innovation in the financial sectors. It speaks about the financial sectors. It says, yes, do it. It will improve your productivity. It will actually help you with your customer experience. It will improve customer satisfaction. But it also gives boundaries because we know that the AI presents some threats if it's not under control, if it's not put, if the purposes are not clear, and if certain boundaries are not set. So it does talk about innovation. Then I picked up 3 topics about the AI Act. We can make a lecture and be here for the whole day. But I picked up 3 major topics because I think those are the most relevant for our sector, for the financial sector. The second topic is more an example. Is an example of what the AI Act requires for a segment where we have high-risk activities, and that is controversial. Transparency is a controversial aspect of the AI Act. And for this one, this is why I picked it up, because I thought, okay, let's talk about this. Let's dig a bit into this without going into too much technical stuff, but let's talk about this, see how it came up into this regulation. And then I want to talk about harmonization. Harmonization, not in the sense of, harmonizing the European laws under the regulation, that's already done. I'm talking about harmonization with the other regulations that apply to the financial segment, the banking stuff, the banking regulations. So we'll go through that. Maybe another just small thing, because it's so current. There is, probably you heard about something called the AI Liability Directive. If you haven't, your lawyers certainly have. And when we hear liability, we're like, liability. It's a directive. It's not, and it's a proposal of directive. Has not yet passed. And it's a very controversial thing. It's controversial because think about AI. Think about what Luke just said about automation. Think about the human and machine balance. How much is human action? How much is machine action? And so where does the liability shift? That's the first reason why it's so controversial. But theoretically, the laws to implement this directive should be coming. The directive is not self-implementing like the regulation. Regulations, when they are off from the parliament, they are just applicable. The directive requires local legislation to make an effort. This one is not yet there. But I know that all the lawyers are keeping their antennas up, because that is going to be interesting when it comes up. Just wanted to mention, because I think it's important to understand that this is something that keeps moving, keeps going. And it keeps going as a technology, and the law tries to catch up with the technology as much as possible, and the lawyers are always a bit lost in trying to stick the legal concepts to the innovation. So this is just the introduction of what I would like to talk about. And let's start with innovation. So it's written there. It's written there in Article 1. It starts like that. It sets up the frames. It says, hey, we want the AI to serve the humans. And I recently have heard something from someone, I think on LinkedIn, who was saying, well, this generative AI is really great, but it doesn't do my laundry. So what is it for? Well, we know that AI actually can help us doing our job much more productive. It can help our customers have a much more involving experience, etc. But to be human-centric, it still requires, as Luc says, human participation. And in our activities, there will be certain things that we will look into where there are obligations required by the Act, exactly for the reason of allowing innovation, which are related to human oversight, but also informing the user, making sure it's transparent, and we will get there. Another important thing, and maybe this is a difference between the AI Act and the GDPR, is that the type of fundamental rights that the AI Act look at are different than the GDPR ones. Obviously, broadly, they are the same, but the GDPR was looking at data, at massive amount of data, at processing of large amount of data. Here, we're talking about all fundamental rights. So we're talking also about the rights of people having a roof over their head. And this comes, obviously, in the financial services also, when a bank needs to make credit scoring or decide whether or not, this applies mostly to insurance, to life insurance is risk assessment and these sort of things. And curiously enough, as I said, the AI Act touches exactly on those. It spells them out. It takes out those cases. And it takes them out as high-risk cases. So it's not something that we cannot do, but we have to do it within certain boundaries. So let's go there. This was my example, the example I wanted to bring. Those boundaries are many and different. So there are different rules to be followed. The AI Act has articles and pages around this. But one of the most controversial, and maybe also more, I don't know if you can see it this way, I mean with this side, and maybe more articulated in the Act, is really the requirement for transparency. The requirement for transparency has a different level of obligations. I mean, as I said before, there is an obligation to inform the users that this is an AI they're dealing with. It applies also to the designer. It requires the designer and the provider of the AI to be clear in their design, to be transparent, to explain how they applied the AI. It requires also that the provider gives the deployer instructions on using the AI. This also means that it's collaborative. So if you look at this, all these obligations that we have here cannot be done by one party and then cascaded out. It's up to you now. And it cannot be the other way around either. Oh, you give me a product, it's done. I just press a button and it works. It is collaborative. And as part of this collaboration, also the technology came up. There are several techniques to ensure that transparency is accessible to the users and to the agents in the case of our business. Transparency also is related to a fundamental other requirements, which is explainability. You have heard about explainability, traceability, etc. I picked explainability because it's one of those where we still have a huge philosophical discussion around this. But it's a philosophical discussion that is not an end to itself. It's actually an important philosophical discussion, because when we talk about artificial intelligence, we always have to compare it with what we know and what is human intelligence. And explainability, it's a difficult topic even for humans. There is a big debate about what is actually explainable about human behavior. And when we apply this to the system, when we apply to an AI system, and by the way, the AI Act talks about AI systems and AI general purpose models, but it doesn't define the generality of models, which is one of the aspects of when we define explainability that is interesting, because it depends also on the purpose of the model, of the design of the model. But anyways, to go back to this, one of the interesting aspects of explainability is transparency is a criteria that goes the opposite ways of opacity. So the more opacity you have, the less transparency, and vice versa. Explainability is a criteria to actually qualify transparency. So if something is explainable, and there are plenty of techniques of explainability, and I'm talking really about technical tools, but also methodologies, and methodologies that are based on the AI structure, but also methodologies that are based on criteria that are more based on the intuitiveness of the reasoning. So, and talking about reasoning with AI is always a little bit borderline, okay? So take it with a pinch of salt. So basically, when we look at how a decision is made, we can do this post hoc, which is what most companies do, but also there is a part of it that is ante hoc. And that is basically what is designed in the machine itself. And we will look into this in a moment. So there are some tools for that. I hope I'm not going too slow here. You tell me. That was about transparency. And I wanted to take that as an example, because when I go there, as I said, there are plenty of other things. But that is an example of the complexity of what needs to be done and how providers like also Unblu work on this heavily. The second thing that I want to mention, which is good news, is really good news for our segment. As I said before, the AI Act speaks about the financial sector. It speaks a lot about the financial sector. It pops up in many articles. And the reason for that is because the financial sector is very heavily regulated already. And the European legislators were clever enough to say, we don't want to duplicate effort here. We want this innovation to happen. And we know that the banks are already subject to banking authorities, banking regulations on a number of things. They have to provide documentations on everything. They have to set up processes for breaches and everything else. And so the AI Act here, I'm quoting just some of the articles, in the recitals there's more. It quotes the financial sector as a sector that can leverage from the existing regulatory framework. And this is really important. I think this is one of the competitive advantages that the financial sector has on other sectors, which are not necessarily so regulated. The AI Act also speaks about pharma, speaks about others, but not to this extent. And it also delegates some of the processes to the banking authorities themselves. I'm not saying that if you are compliant with all the BaFin or FINMA regulations, then you're fully compliant with the AI Act, because AI is a new technology and there's still some work to do. The documents are different, the technology is different, so you have to probably add it to what you're already doing. But the AI Act saves that, saves the double work. It tells you don't have to do it to duplicate work. You have to tweak what you're doing, you have to look into this, there may be gaps, but you can leverage on that, while other branches, other markets cannot do that. And I think this is good news, and this is really aiming to establish and foster more innovation and more applications of AI or controlled AI in the financial services. And this is, again, something that your lawyer are probably already looking at. They are the expert in here. I'm not the expert about banking regulation. I always try to learn as much as possible from my counterparts on the other side. But I know that that's exactly where we're looking at. We're looking at how do we use the current processes to actually introduce AI into the banks. So with that, this is my last slide. And it's like, I see this a little bit as various elements of a journey into the AI adoption in the financial service. And it ends up in a process that I would like to call know your provider, because at the end of the day, while you have to provide to use oversight, especially in the high-risk activities, but generally in all banking activities, so while human oversight is always there and it's a task of the bank, then there are certain other things that actually are requirements to actually choose your provider, choose your product. It's really important that the product that you're using is user-friendly. Actually, I think that from my perspective, and I'm not talking only about AI and about the bank, but also about any other technology, if the technology is not friendly, the risk of non-compliance skyrockets. Because there will always be somebody in the organization looking for a tool outside what is sanctioned by your organization. And it's like using WhatsApp for communicating, even if it's not a tool of your choice. So that will always happen. That's where the risk is. Shadow IT remains one of the biggest risks. And so this is why it needs to be a user-friendly tool. It's something that people want to use. There are also some technical aspects that are becoming the golden standard in this space. And the product that use those allows for a more explainable AI, which we discussed earlier on. I'm talking about the confidence checks on the AI outcome. The fact that the AI is able to make a confidence check to ensure that, for instance, there's less bias, there are less hallucinations. I'm talking about also the contextualization, the fact that the databases upon which the AI is working is solid, has been checked, is clear, is complete. And this is, by the way, an AI requirement, an AI Act requirement spelled out in the regulation. Also, it's important to make sure that the provider has the applicable standards, the applicable certifications, that they continuously maintain those so that there is a cycle to check and review the actual compliance of the solutions. Finally, one thing that, so the AI market, as you know, we have the models, and then we do have the deployment of the applications. It's really important that in the review of this, if the provider of the underlying model is able to provide some contractual comfort around their product, that this is cascaded down across the entire chain. And it's also important that those instructions we were telling before are really clear. It's really understandable. And it's also standardized. Always worry if it's something that, it's always tweaked. So it's really important that the instructions are clear and repeatable. And finally, reputable providers. The market is exploding. There are providers of AI all over the place, and small, big, large, medium things. And it's really important that they are specialized in what you do. Specialized in the financial services, knowing their customer, knowing what your needs are, building something that is compliant, but it's also functional to the banking business. I think this was what I wanted to close with. I don't know if I'm in the time. I think it was 45, right?
No, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Can you now see why legal is actually entertaining at Unblu? Because you get all of these questions, and you were highlighting one thing, which is something we've been, maybe you're going to touch on it, Maurice, in the Beeper presentation. We've been going around the block for ages with product management and engineering around predictability and explainability. And we've been looking at certain ways and how to implement agent assist at Beeper. And the question from Elena was, will this thing always say the same thing? And the answer from the text was, of course not. It's AI. It will give you a different answer. And then you get in all sorts of technicalities around, well, why would it do that? Because in AI, we're basically in the AI Act and in the way that we're implementing it in line with the regulatory frameworks that we already have. So the great discussions on where does the cloud sit and how do you actually isolate it and who can access it and when can you access it and what's the gated processes. The question comes up, does it actually take the information it gets from the end users, being the bank's customers, to improve the answers? And every tech person would say it should. And every legal person would say it can't. Because that would mean you would have to get the consent from the bank's customer to use their question and the interaction in order to improve the model. So you're pretty much in a mission impossible here, yet there is a framework on how you can start to solve this. But that's kind of why these are fun discussions, because in the end, we find solutions, right? There's one solution. I don't want to preempt anything on Beeper, but Beeper, the implementation was human oversight. So one of the things that Luc's been talking about is, can you guess Luc's driving a Tesla? No. A Tesla is driving Luc. It's probably the better way to put it. That's the whole question around human oversight and level. And we have the same question in, if AI responds to the end customer's question in a bot-level conversation, you're responsible as the bank of what the bot said. So how do you ensure that you have human oversight to what the answer actually said? And there's some of the things where we said, well, let's take this step by step, because the other thing is also explainability. If you start with human oversight and you have an agent advisor go through the process and confirm the answer, and you do it 99 times out of 100 that you confirm it, it's not only oversight, but it starts to be explainable. And that's kind of where the legal and the regulatory and the product and the procedural come all together, and it actually starts to be fun to think it through, because it then provides for a pathway that you can actually use it. Because that's the other conversation we have with many of you on, we want to use it, but it's not compliant. If you don't take it apart, you'll have this conversation forever with not having this kind of legal, but having a different kind of legal at the bank who says, no, can't do it. Says here, has to be explainable. So you have to have a process to get to the point that you can make it more predictable and explainable. And with all things in life, I think there's a threshold, right? There has to be. You can't be perfect, but you have to get there, right?
Absolutely, and that's a target.
Yeah.
So it's a constant target.
So we're at the end of this session, but we actually have a throw microphone, which I'm keen to use. So is there any one of you who wants some free legal advice that usually comes at $450 an hour?
Sorry, I just have to correct you. Unblu is not yet a law firm.
But wait, we've got a microphone, one of these fancy ones.
Do you think that the AI Act is a blessing for the European Union or a risk? because there's also companies pulling away from the European market because it says it's too constraining, we can't leverage the benefits of AI. But of course, there's also security aspects for everybody living in the European Union. So how do you see that?
So I'm part of actually a governance working group at the IEEE, which works with AI. And that's kind of a question. It's always the tension between how much you want to regulate before it actually has an impact on the market. And it's a pendulum. So at some point, you have people that are really on the, I mean, Draghi was getting there, right, with this computational issue, but he touched only on the computational limitation because it would be, because the European AI Act is not, as I said before, is not meant to stifle innovation, to the opposite. And I think it's normal that the technology is always going faster than the law in that space. So I can give you my personal view on this. My personal view is that we need to have the boundaries because the boundaries make us faster. Yes, in other places, the technology may go very fast, but also make it very fast against the wall. For us, it's very fast and steady. And when we talk about regulated market like the financial market, that is the best playground to actually make it right. Because you already have those regulations, you have the processes. So once you start implementing that, having the AI Act is an advantage because it keeps you compliant and it keeps you going straight in the right direction while applying that. If there would be no regulation, the risk that you have on the other side, on the banking regulatory framework, that would be huge. And that will stifle innovation because it will be in the same situation as for the Cloud Act. No, I'm losing control, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And we in legal are always a little bit conservative, to say the least. So I do understand what Jens was saying, that my colleague would say, well, don't do it. We're not doing it. But if you look at the fact that now you have a framework and you have the rules of the game to follow, on top of the others that you had before, then honestly, I think it would be foolish not to do it, because those guys that are doing it without rules are actually running more risks. So outside the European Union, it's the Wild West. So that's my personal opinion. Again, I'm not giving legal advice here. They have their lawyers. Okay, so this is. I hope I answered
They
your
tend
question.
not to be as outspoken, so that's why I think it's a huge
Bite
opportunity.
my tongue.
Anyone else for a question? We would have time for one more question. If not, Elena's here all day.
Yeah.
As stated, it's not legal. Oh, here we go.
Hello. For financial risks, okay, but if it's for security risks, like let's say someone would train an AI to break security in other companies, then the AI Act is blocking this research in Europe, or no? My question is, are we blocking only, are we let's say, directing only the AI use in the financial sector, or are we actually directing the AI use also in other sectors? It's global, no?
Yes, the AI Act applies to all sectors. I find it curious, actually, that the financial sector was so much spelled out. It's like it was in the radar screen of the legislator when they did it. In terms of security, okay, again, it's my perspective on this. You can't really stop a thief just because you put all the locks and all the bars and the windows and everything else. If the thief wants to enter, they will try at least. You can try to stop it, but they will try. You can't stop a try. And recent facts, showed that security is always, again, a target that you have to get as close as possible to reach. In the AI, I mean, if you look at different deep dive technologies that we have right now, the AI is not necessarily the ones that implies more risk for security. I mean, if I look at emerging technologies, I mean, I look at, for instance, quantum that is now applied in discrete application, even in the financial business as a test, the risk there is much higher, especially coupled with AI. But I think that the AI Act is also covering that space, at least in terms of compliance. It requires certain quite heavy checks and balances on the security space, and the certifications also on AI that are coming up. This is all going into that direction. So I don't think that the security risk is something, again, it's a race, has always been a race in security. But I don't think it's something that has ever stopped innovation. It hasn't stopped it in other technology. I don't think it will stop it here.
And typically, it's also something that on our side, if you can describe it, you can audit it. If you can audit it, you can assign a risk to it, and then you can have a risk mitigation strategy. Again, it doesn't make it perfect, but I think it's an illustration of the regulatory nature. So one of the things we've been doing 3-4 years ago is we went first down the path of ISO certification and then of SOC 2 Type 2 certification. And what you do as part of the ISO, you actually have to come up with a risk catalog, a risk register. And then you have to evaluate the risks. And the risks that are too high in your evaluation, you have to mitigate. And I think that exactly speaks to the point of that was made here. Financial services tends to have that and tends to oblige providers and subcontractors to follow along and do the same thing. And once you do that, it becomes a lot more controllable because you describe it and you know what you're talking about. Wonderful, Elena. Thank you so much. Elena's here the rest of the day.